what it was like to be a teenager in 1980s America, a journey to the heart of an unforgettable decade. Imagine a time without smartphones, social media, Wi-Fi, or even the internet as we know it today. Now, transport yourself to a decade where colors were brighter, music was louder, and youth culture was a blend of rebellion, discovery, and unforgettable moments. We're talking about the 1980s, an era that, for many, represents the peak of adolescence, marked by hope, restlessness, and pure youthful energy. The height of teenage rebellion. The 1980s in the United States was a time of great contrasts. Streets were lit up by neon and vibrant colors, with teens sporting oversized shoulder pads, ripped jeans, iconic sneakers like Nike and Reebok, and voluminous hair held up by heaps of hairspray. Colors were bold, fabrics shimmered under the dance floor lights, and the music on the radio set the pace for an entire generation. But behind the glamour and glitz, youth faced serious challenges and deep changes. Politics were turbulent, the economy was struggling with the ups and downs of a recession, and social divisions were growing. Concerns about drugs and urban violence were palpable. Teens were living through a transitional moment, caught between the promise of freedom and the harsh realities of a constantly shifting world. The music explosion and the power of MTV. In 1981, MTV launched and forever changed how young people connected with music. The era of music videos began, giving teens a new way to express their emotions, styles, and trends. Music became a meeting point where many found themselves, and the bands and artists of the 80s became the icons of an entire generation. Michael Jackson, Madonna, Prince, Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, these weren't just names, they were almost mythical figures. Each music video was a visual and auditory experience that went beyond the albums. Michael Jackson's Thriller wasn't just an album, it was a cultural phenomenon that united a generation around an infectious beat, signature dance moves, and a revolution in how music was consumed. Alongside pop giants, an alternative scene was thriving. Rock, punk, and emerging styles like goth and new wave became the languages for those seeking a cry of rebellion or simply a space to identify and stand out. Bands like The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, and Joy Division brought a darker, introspective, and sometimes uncomfortable aesthetic, but one true to the feelings of youth craving something beyond the mainstream radio hits. Style is a form of expression. Talking about 80s fashion wasn't just about clothes, it was about identity. Fashion reflected how young people saw themselves and, more importantly, how they wanted to be seen. High-waisted pants, ripped jeans, shoulder-padded tops, and leather jackets were just the beginning. Teens didn't just follow trends, they reinvented them, making each outfit a personal statement. Their look wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a symbol of belonging to a cultural movement, a way to express who they were and who they wanted to be. The iconic preppy style with polo shirts and sweaters draped over shoulders stood in sharp contrast to the punk boldness with leather jackets, piercings, and colorful hair. And let's not forget sneakers, a symbol of status and identity. Wearing Nike Air Jordans wasn't just buying shoes, it was buying into a legacy, something synonymous with being cool. For many teens, these items were more than possessions, they were status symbols, tools of expression, and key parts of defining themselves within youth culture. The big screen and teenage representation. While fashion and music shaped identity, movies provided an emotional roadmap. The 80s saw Hollywood produce a slew of films that uniquely captured the ups and downs of adolescence, funny, dramatic, and heartfelt. Movies like The Breakfast Club, 1985, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, and 16 Candles, 1984, gave a voice to an entire generation. Teen characters were no longer just side roles in adult stories, they were the protagonists, and their stories of friendship, love, loneliness, and rebellion became universally relatable. Misfits, popular kids, nerds, rebels, everyone had their space, and what seemed like simple fun on screen turned into a reflection of real life. The famous Breakfast Club, for example, showed different types of teens coming together, people who otherwise would never cross paths, setting aside differences to find shared experiences stronger than social labels. Technology, or the lack thereof. One of the biggest differences between being a teen in the 80s and today was the technology involved. Cell phones were still far from common, and the internet wasn't yet accessible. Communication happened through landlines, letters, and for the lucky few, early pagers. Young people depended on face-to-face contact, conversations in person, meeting at the mall or street corners, and late-night phone calls filled with the nervousness of possibly being caught by parents. Hanging out at someone's house, going to the movies, or garage parties, all happened without social media. No filters, no likes, but something much more real, human connection. The era of drugs and violence. But the 80s teenage experience also had a darker side. The rise of drugs like cocaine and crack affected thousands of families and communities, especially in urban areas. Many youth found themselves trapped in a risky culture where drugs and violence took over the streets, pushing them further away from hopeful futures. Teens also dealt with rising social and political tensions. Racial issues, economic inequality, Cold War politics, and family struggles were daily realities for many. The legacy of the decade. Now imagine traveling back in time to the last night of the 80s. Synth sounds echo through the streets, neon lights start to fade, and the last dances on disco floors play out to songs etched in millions of memories. The clock strikes midnight, welcoming 1990 in a new world emerging. But what about the 80s? What really remains from this decade of excess, transitions, and revolutions? Can an entire generation be summed up in one word? Maybe not, but we can try to understand the weight of that decade, the impact of its most intense moments, and how it still resonates today. The memory of the 80s isn't just in the songs that keep playing in our headphones or the movies still cherished by new generations. It's not just in the stylish clothes making a comeback or the retro posters decorating vintage stores. The true legacy of the 80s lies in the cultural roots planted amid a vibrant chaos of change. At the heart of that decade was a youth full of courage and uncertainty, immersed in the possibilities of a future yet unwritten. They didn't know it then, of course, but unknowingly, they were paving the way for generations to come. And what a path it was! The Cultural Revolution of the 1980s. The first major legacy of the 1980s is undoubtedly the cultural revolution it sparked. Music, like never before, became a universal language. Bands and artists were not just commercial successes, they were voices echoing in the hearts of young people, expressing their frustrations, joys, loves, and losses. Michael Jackson didn't just dance with the wolf, he changed the way music was consumed and understood. Madonna didn't just dress eccentrically, she shaped a revolution in identity and the freedom to be who you truly wanted to be. And it wasn't just that. Music, movies, fashion, and art, everything was immersed in a wave of technological innovation. The music video, for example, evolved into its own form of art, and MTV became a symbol of that transition. On that small screen, images intertwined with sound to create a new language of expression for teenagers. When you watched a Duran Duran video, you weren't just seeing a musical performance. You were witnessing a vision, a visual narrative that connected deeply with your own sense of identity. The evolution of social behavior. The 80s also left a significant mark on how society and individuals began to see themselves and others. The decade was marked by growing acceptance of diversity, an explosion of identities, lifestyles, and ways of thinking. Fashion, more than ever, wasn't about following strict rules. It was about self-expression, mixing, reinventing, and creating something unique.